The garden affords a beautiful emblem of a Christian's continual progress in the path of virtue. Plants always mount upwards and never stop in their growth till they have attained to that maturity which the author of nature has prescribed. So in a Christian, everything ought to carry him toward that perfection which the sanctity of his state requires, and every desire of his soul, every action of his life, should be a step advancing to this in a direct line. You often hear the phrase thrown around that something works. It works. Usually referring to something that the way you do something in your family or in your marriage or with your kids, whatever setup that is. And that's when I often hear the term is, we do X, Y, and Z. And, it works. It works for our family. This is the thing that works. And I was just kind of reflecting about the notion and the phrase, it works. And without not even giving the specifics to what is the thing working, but just whether or not we should be satisfied with a thing that works versus what is good. Because a lot of things fall into the category of working. And just because something works or something is functioning or that is the way something is done doesn't mean that's what is good or best, loving even for your family, for yourself, for your children, you name it. And I suppose I was thinking about this because it seems like such a common phrase to hear. And I think that notion sets the bar pretty low. That there isn't like a goal or something that we should be striving or aiming for universally. And that's because things can take a lot of forms and that, again, I'm not criticizing any particular thing. But I've been reflecting upon it just for myself, thinking about, do I want something? Do I want to be doing something? Do I want systems in my home? Do I want my marriage to just work? Do I want the schedule for my kids or their habits or the way that I'm caring for them just be satisfactory? Or do I want to pursue things in my life in general with a sense of zeal, a sense of I want to do what is best and what is good and what is better, maybe for my family, for myself, for my marriage, rather than something that just works. At least not apply to family life or relational, personal things. Usually the notion of something working doesn't mean it's like awesome or great. Like, for example, like if somebody's like, hey, how's your car? And you're like, yeah, it works. Usually it means that the car isn't the greatest thing in the world. It just functions and it runs and it gets you to and where you want to go. But that's not the aim and goal of our lives. Our goal is heaven, and the way in which we get there is through rigorously striving and pursuing our Lord in every aspect of our lives. And that is manifested in a kind of a serious, disciplined, pursuing, discerning, praying, actually doing things, striving for standards in our lives and holding ourselves to those higher standards to create and build a life of virtue, of prayer, of charity, of love, like all of these grand pursuits that we're called to strive for. Like they're not just created by doing things that just work. And I guess I think about that for me, like if I were to say something works, oftentimes for me, what that means is that I don't love it, but this is in my mind at least, maybe the best that I can do about my situation, or it's the best that I have to give. And this is the result of that. And that's so vague, which is why I don't think I would be satisfied with that kind of answer if I said something is working when I'm referring to something very personal or relationships in my life, such as my children or my marriage. I would want to get really specific about, okay, like maybe this works, but I mean, I think really the question is not what works, but what do you actually want your life, your family, your marriage to look like? I'm applying it to those things in particular because those are the things that are most important to me. And that question applies the most too. After I ask myself, okay, this is what I want my marriage to look like. Okay, if it doesn't look like that, why doesn't it look like that? And how can I get it to look like that? And is that possible? I mean, there are a lot of, I think, excuses that we can make as to why our lives have to look the way they do, apparently, or things are the way they are. And very often, either it's from laziness, that's what I found with myself, either laziness, maybe I feel stretched too thin, which also is a thing that, you need to ask those questions about. Maybe I'm just dissatisfied, or I just don't have like the strength and the will, to change things up. I'm comfortable. I like where things are and I don't want things to change. And very often the reasons why things are just working and they're not great or amazing or I'm not striving for more aren't typically really great reasons. They're not born out of extraneous circumstances. They're typically the the result of decisions that I've made because of my either lack of virtue, my my priorities, the things that I've made priorities in my life that maybe shouldn't be or should be rearranged. And so I don't know if I would agree with the sentiment that something should just work, nor do I think that we should settle for things that just work. And so as I wrap up here, I guess I'm just pondering, like don't our don't we as individuals deserve something that's great, not just works? Our families, our marriages, our vocations deserve greatness, and not just functionality or just scraping by because of its dignity that we have as people, and then also the state of life that we're living, how valuable our marriages are, our relationships with our children, the families that we're creating, that just getting by and just doing what works maybe just isn't enough. And so I'll leave you with just a few questions to ponder. Do I want things in my life to just work, or do I want them to be great? How can I rearrange things in my life to make the things that should be great that way? Is there anything in my life that works but could be better if I just made different choices? Thanks so much for joining me this time around, folks. Till next time, may God be praised in all things. Bye.